Greetings, Ranger fans! Jake here for a deeper look at Episode 1 of Power Rangers Dino Fury, Destination Dinohenge. But first, a rapid run-through. Let's kick off the counter. It's morphin' time! So we open on a girl riding on a pink scooter bike, probably the Yellow Ranger. This is Amelia, a reporter for BuzzBlast. Not at all the sort of place I would imagine a quintet of color-coded young adults hanging out on a semi-weekly basis. Although her workaholic boss would much rather her do stories on glow-in-the-dark lipstick, because the YouTube algorithm loves cosmetics, she relents on letting her do a story on the supposedly haunted site of Dinohenge, and Amelia heads out to the forest with her GoPro mounted on her very pink electric net-launching ghost catcher. Total Yellow Ranger. She ends up electrifying a biker in a poncho named Ali, who quickly forgives her and introduces her to his mom, an archaeologist studying the circle of 6-story stone statues that make up Dinohenge, until Warden Garcia, more like Warden Buzzkill, calls Ollie's mom away to file a report over their lack of permit, leaving the kids behind to watch a purple dino-themed knight fall from the sky, scan for an energy source, rip a hole in the ground with a sword, and then be like, yes, let's follow him into this hole. There they find an alien chamber where the knight, Void Knight, menaces a cyborg dinosaur, Solon, trying to wake up a red Power Ranger, Zato, from cryosleep, and Ollie grabs a sword off the wall to save her, and Amelia zaps Void Knight with her shock snare, and Solon's like, here, have this key and pop it in the sword so that these soldier statues will fight for you, but then Void Knight catches the key and he does that thing. So now they're fighting the stone henchmen, and Amelia grabs a sword too, and the swords go all glowy, and the swords give them morphers, and Solon's like, here, have these other keys, and they shove the keys into the morphers to become Power Rangers, and Zato wakes up and joins the party, just as Void Knight finds the energy source, which is a drawer full of glowy blobby things, Sporix, and Zato turns his sword into a dagger to sell extra merch, but accidentally ends up freeing the Sporix instead, and Void Knight escapes to chase after them, and one of them hatching into a monster that he recruits to help catch the rest, Shockhorn. So now Zato demorphs, reveals he's an alien from the planet Ravcon, which was ravaged by the Sporix, so he and the Knights of Ravcon followed them to Earth, teamed up with dinosaurs, got beaten again, and then the Morphin Masters merged their spirits with 6 dinosaurs, creating Dinohenge and turning them all into Power Rangers so that they could defeat and capture the Sporix, but now it's 65 million years later, his team's been lost, and it's up to Zato to train Amelia and Ollie to take up their mantle. Roll credits. And that's the end of the episode. Now, let's take a deeper look. In many respects, this premiere felt like a remix, clearly taking inspirations from many different sources and then putting a different spin on them. First, let's address the biggest bombshell of this episode, the Morphin Masters. The Morphin Masters were first introduced on September 30th, 1993, in the 7th episode of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Big Sisters, as the creators of the ancient Power Eggs. And until this episode, that was the only time they had ever been referenced in the series proper. For decades, the Morphin Masters remained the stuff of fanfiction, with many in the fandom crediting them as the literal masters of the Morphin Grid, the multiversal energy field that has been referenced on and off throughout the years as the source of the Rangers' powers. Eventually, they made their way into the Boom Studios comic book continuity, first being hinted at during 2017's massive 25th anniversary arc, Shattered Grid, where Zordon first communicated with their 3 emissaries, who all look really cool by the way, shifting back and forth between all the different red, yellow, and blue Ranger suits that have existed throughout the franchise's history, and the Heart of the Master, an artifact that was sought after by Lord Draken, although the design used in the Shattered Grid finale definitely clashed with the designs that we eventually saw in Beyond the Grid, a follow-up arc that gave us our first clear view of the Masters themselves. This design was clearly the greater inspiration for their appearance in Destination Dinohenge, eschewing the cloaked sorcerer look of their original introduction and giving us more of a caped paladin aesthetic, which also blends much more cleanly with the medieval knight motif of Dino Fury's source material, Kishiryu Sentai Ryu Soldier. This really highlights a major strength of this episode, as it clearly takes cues from Ryu Soldier and finds connections to the broader Power Rangers multiverse, something that had already been done with a previous Dino-themed season, the fan-favorite Power Rangers Dino Thunder, where Tommy was brought back in a clear parallel between the evil Green Ranger arc of Mighty Morphin and Bakuryu Sentai Apu Rangers Abera Killer, better known as the White Dino Thunder Ranger, Trent. However, this acknowledgement of Power Rangers history does go past the big reveal of the Morphin Masters for smaller, subtler nods. You see, at no point in the premiere does anyone have to ask, what's a Power Ranger? Amelia and Ollie already know that Rangers have powers, suits, weapons, and, according to the news, Zords, firmly establishing that the Rangers are well-known entities in a nice reflection of the pop culture saturation they've achieved in real life. And the writers take advantage of that pre-existing knowledge to hype up their audience in the shared understanding of what's coming next, rather than talking down to them. At this point, I think it's fair to bring up the premiere of the previous Power Rangers installment, Power Rangers Beast Morphers, to understand how our new showrunner, Simon Bennett, is working with established writers Becca Barnes and Alwyn Dale to take inspirations from the premiere structure we saw during Chip Lynn's tenure, while still putting their own spin on it. While Beast Unleashed made the Morphin Grid central to its plot and name-dropped well-known villains, including the classic Rita Repulsa and the more recent Sledge and Galvanax, Destination Dinohenge uses the Morphin Grid in direct connection to obscure characters that are here being expanded upon and integrated into the series' backstory. Looking farther back into the premieres of Dino Charge and Ninja Steel, which both opened on expanded prologues to establish their backstory, Dino Fury instead holds off on its backstory until the final scenes of the premiere, enhancing the mystery of the first two acts and leaving gaps in the story that Simon Bennett has already promised in interviews will be filled in later. The DNA of these past premieres also emerges in other ways. We once again have a pair of soon-to-be Rangers having a surprise encounter with an evil alien appearing in the woods, just as in Powers from the Past and Return of the Prism. But we also have a fight in the Rangers' base where the villain takes control of the Rangers' allies, just as in Beast Unleashed. But perhaps most prominently, this marks our fourth installment in a row where our plucky lead female ranger gets entangled in the plot while trying to pursue her dreams. But for once, this doesn't run parallel to a Red Ranger with father issues trying to achieve his personal goal. Instead, Zato is held back until nearly the end of the episode, with his tragic past severing any familial attachments for the time being, placing him in a mentorship role that serves functionally as a father figure to the rest of the team. And that brings us to our characters. While Amelia definitely has traits in common with Shelby, Sarah, and Zoe, her love of the supernatural also brings to mind a different character from the very first episode ever written by Becca Barnes, Albert Smith, the original purple Dino Charge Ranger. Basically, if it involves cats, cryptids, or cooking shows, there's a good chance that Becca was a strong advocate. However, Amelia and Ollie both look to take inspiration from a different source as well. Ryusoulger. And no, I'm not talking about their direct counterparts. While Ollie does appear to have some of Melto's more rational personality, Amelia currently is nothing like her super strong, food-loving counterpart Asuna. Instead, they both appear to draw off the character of Ui Tatsui, originally portrayed by the dearly departed Mana Kinjo, with Amelia's Buzz Blast job paralleling Ui's job as a YouTuber, and Ollie's archaeologist mother, Dr. Akana, paralleling Ui's paleontologist father, Dr. Tatsui. But these characters are also more than just our inspirations. The interactions that emerge as a result of mixing and matching these traits adds a whole new dynamic and dimension to who they are, as we see during the brief but vital character-building scene between Dr. Akana and Warden Garcia departing and Void Knight arriving, where Amelia's love of the supernatural comes into direct conflict with Ollie's scientific upbringing, which in itself draws attention to the inherently contradictory mix of science and sorcery that has been part of the franchise since its inception. And this all brings me to the crux of what makes Destination Dinohenge so fascinating and gives me hope for Power Rangers Dino Fury moving forward. Yes, it clearly draws inspiration from the Sentai, the comics, past premieres, personal preferences of the writers, and the franchise as a whole, but it puts them all together in a way that generates new connections, expands upon past concepts, and inspires new elements. Which, let's face it, is what a good remix should do. And this is a good example of what Power Rangers, and by extension any adaptive media, should be striving to do. Take the things you love best, put them together, and see what new stories evolve from there. This is also all very much in line with what Simon Bennett has already stated in interviews with Sci-Fi, CNET, ComicBook.com, Illuminerdi, and Den of Geek, where he explained that there won't be any designated comic relief characters, but instead breaking those roles down and spreading the comedy around throughout the cast. And also that the season as a whole will be aiming for more serialized arcs, rather than episodic standalones. We've already seen this through the use of snarky banter outside the context of more fight scenes, the use of visual gags like the electrified neck, the crossed fingers, and the glow-in-the-dark lipstick, and the fact that we've only met 3 Rangers so far, with 6 being firmly established in the flashback sequence. Although the fact that our park warden has the same last name as our next 2 Rangers definitely helps lay down that groundwork for the future. It all speaks to a more holistic approach to the series, where characters have room to expand and grow beyond their archetypal roles, and the story is allowed to evolve alongside them. To quote the theme, it's an evolution revolution. Now, the show still has some rough edges to smooth out, as some of the portrayals are still a bit broad, and the attempt to simply drop the characters into a mystery while simultaneously establishing that this is just how their world operates does undermine some of the impact in places, as the more spectacular wow factor is often replaced by a subtler sense of intrigue that generates more interest than it does excitement. With, of course, the exception of the Morphin Master sequence, which, yes, of course, blew my mind. But even with some very fun action sequences and polished production design, the clear focus of this episode was the setup for whatever is coming next. So the big question here becomes whether they can stick their landing on that payoff. So make sure to join me next time for a deeper look at Episode 2 of Power Rangers Dino Fury, Sporix Unleashed. And if you would like to share this week's rapid run-through, you can find it as a standalone clip over at Morphin Legacy's YouTube channel. Please like, share, subscribe to us both, ring the bell for future notifications, and until next time, farewell, Ranger fans, and let the power protect.